Okay, so we'll start with you, Norman, if that's okay. I hear you had a nickname of Flash. Can you tell us why?
Well, it's a long story. Do you want the real story or do you want my version?
Well, I don't know really.
No, seriously.
I've got a job Tuesday.
I started off my professional career, like quite a few of the cricketers in here, and on the MCC ground staff. So I joined Lord's ground staff in 1978. I was a little baby back then, and I used to try and bowl very, very fast, as you do as a young man. And I remember bowling against one of my young professionals, and this guy called Mark Scott, who was on the ground staff at the time. And he said, "Cool, he bowls as quick as a flash." So that sort of name stuck. So when I got picked for England many, many years later, so like 4 years later, the papers rang Don Wilson up, Don Wilson, who was the head coach here at the MCC, and they wanted to know all about me. So when they spoke to Don, he said, "Oh, you mean Flash?" So the papers are the big headline then, Flash. So that's how that name came about.
Right.
Nothing like what you thought.
Okay. I think you do me a disservice there, Norman. I'm a family entertainer. Vince, I was going to ask you about Middlesex, but after that catch was turned down yesterday, as you are in charge of the umpires and referees...
Just ourselves, because he's got all the answers. Or Alan Jones.
Okay, right. Well, very nicely sidestepped, so that Vince. And someone else asked me, and I'll perhaps unfairly, just take this opportunity to sit in there. Someone said to me, "What does the fourth umpire do? Does he just carry the balls? Or could he not have seen that catch yesterday?"
Well, you know,
what does the fourth umpire
It is
do?
wonderful coming to a country that has this great unbiased view on that one particular delivery. And I'm glad you haven't been sucked into that.
No. Okay, well, it's good to see the man in charge of umpires and referees. Only a pity he can't see us, but there we go.
That is a great privilege, though.
Vince, how did you come to choose Middlesex, or did Middlesex choose you?
I mean, I didn't choose Middlesex. I'm a teacher. That's basically my profession. And I was fortunate to have JT and Don Bennett, who thought they saw something in me which I really didn't see in myself. And I was working I was teaching and then moving across to Alex Perry or Wigan Stevens, a VAT company out here in Bevan. And they came across because, thank God, unbeknown to Brearley, they were considering me. And, which I think is true, right? And they came across, and I refused the Morgan because I was moving into a new job at Wigan Steve, and I was fortunate enough that Procky had said to JT and Don Bennett, my proctor had said at a bright face, "Don't listen to Vince because he said no, go and speak to his boss." A guy called Derek Smith, whose brother I think was knighted here for Enoch Oil work, and he was a freak of Middlesex. He had watched 1948 as a young kid, Edridge and Compton. So when they came to see him, they said, "Sure, I'm a Middlesex man, you can have him for 6 months." That's why I came.
And were you tempted? You were a huge success here, of course. Were you tempted to stay on?
Most sportsmen here most probably will know that sort of regime of the first season, no one knows who you are, so you get away with murder. You don't want to test it for a second season. And Bevan, my wife was pregnant with our third kid, so it made it impractical to come back.
Right, so you weren't concentrating on your cricket enough.
But I did keep it within bounds, you know.
Right, Mike, tell us about your 3 wickets.
I can't wait.
I had the idea that one of the forms of cricket that was seriously neglected since about the 1860s was lob bowling. And actually Embers was, as a proper bowler, was really offended when I started to bowl lobs. The other thing that happened was, I remember I bowled some lobs here at Leicestershire, Brian Davison, and he was a very tough, strong chap. And he came down the wicket to me with his bat over his head like this. I thought he was going to hit me. But I think one of those wickets was in Zimbabwe, was a lob. But I don't really want to talk about that, do you?
No, we probably don't want to hear too much about it, really.
You asked me.
I was hoping it'd be more interesting, really, but never mind. Gus, we'll move on to Gus quickly, because tell us about the 92 then, Gus. See if that's a bit more enlightening. Who was that against?
It was against Surrey at the Oval. It's probably one of the finest innings that's ever been played on that ground. Not Kevin Peterson's effort into a hat, really. The story behind it was that the game was petering out. Wakar Yunis was bowling. He bowled 2 in-swing and reverse swing Yorkers before lunch. One hit me on one foot, one hit me on the other. I spent lunch with my feet in ice. And he didn't bowl after lunch, so I just swung heavily for a while and middled everything for an hour. And therefore the game petered on. And Mark Felton bowled me for 92, still stopping, because Gat kept sticking his head around the door and saying, one more over. And I eventually got bowled. So we've got Stephen Finn coming up later on, and the problem with him is he's got a test 50, which is an absolute bloody nightmare. But he hasn't got 92, Murtaugh's not got 100 yet, so there are a few of the bowlers at Middlesex that are still way short of performing to such wonderful standards.
I think we're quite pleased you didn't get 100, really. It would have gone on longer, wouldn't it? Norman, tell us, what was it like for you? You know, you're a young lad, you've come from Jamaica, and then here you are at Lord's. Can you express, your feelings about that day and what Middlesex means to you?
Well, I started my early cricketing sort of career and my enthusiasm for the game playing club cricket, and I used to play for a club called North London Poly. And as a 14-year-old youngster, the school that I went to didn't really play cricket. Luckily enough, I was keen enough to help to start cricket at the school. But anyway, the club I played for was a pretty good club. We used to win the league every year, and I used to perform pretty well. And a lot of my colleagues in my team, they used to disappear every so often and roll up with, and they come back with Middlesex badge across their chest. And I was like, oh, how come you play for Middlesex? I'm just as good a player as you are. How come you play for Middlesex? So they said, yeah, we play for Middlesex, on the Colts, Middlesex schools. So I thought, okay, all right. So I found out where they used to train in the winter. And Rajesh Maru, who used to play for my club as well, his dad said, Norman, I think you're pretty good too. Why don't you come down with me to see where they train? And I did. I got my kit, rolled up. I went to the nets. There's a big man called John Eade who was in the nets, and he was a Middlesex Colts coach at the time, on the 15 coach. And I went up to him and said, "Excuse me, sir, do you mind if I have a bowl?" And he said, "Okay, lad, have a bowl." So I did. First ball I bowled, and I came back, and he said to me, "Have another bowl." So I did, and then he turned around to me and said, "How come we haven't seen you before?" And then he said, and he let me bowl for the rest of that next session. It was on Sundays. He said, "I want you down there every week after that." So, and then a week after, he introduced me to Don Bennett, and he said, "This is Norman Cowans. You better keep an eye on this boy." So that was my introduction to want to play for Middlesex. And then I came here as a 16-year-old boy to have a trial to play for Middlesex. And Don Bennett was in the nets, and Ian Gould was there to face me. And I ran up and bowled a few balls to Ian Gould, and he was pretty impressed. Don was pretty impressed. Don said to me, we don't normally take guys on at 16. Why don't you try and join the MCC staff and see how that goes? And then if you do well, we'll give you a few second team games. We'll take you on after that. So that's what I did. I got a contract with the MCC, joined there in '78, played quite a few second team games. Then got introduced to the dressing room, met all the Middlesex lads who welcomed me. So, I always had a passion for playing for Middlesex from a very, very young age. And when I made my debut in 1980, as a 19-year-old, against Oxford, my first wicket was J.J. Rogers, called Maru, bowled Cowans. Never forget that. And then after that, obviously, Middlesex saw some potential in me. And luckily for me, it was Mike Brearley who was captain when I came into the team, because as a young player coming into a team of international players, you had Mike, you had Gats, you had Embers, you had Radley, you had Daniel, Sylvie, Butcher, Barlow, Slack, Edmonds. You had so many players, and there I was coming into this dressing room full of characters, full of some fantastic guys who, as a young lad, looking from across the pavilion, looking at them train and wanting to one day be out there playing with them. It was just a dream come true when I made my debut finally. But the great thing was, as a young player coming to the team, I thank Mike for this, because he made me feel 10 feet tall. Because as a young player coming with all these great characters, he saw the potential in me, and he made me feel 10 feet tall, and I was able to do well for Middlesex, and played for England soon after that.
Vince, you played with some great players. Sadly, not as much as we would like to have seen you. Obviously, you're a legend here. Can you tell us who perhaps it's 2 or 3 of the best players you've played with and against in your career?
I think if I could just talk South Africa for a bit, it would be Graham Pollock, Barry Ridges, Mike Proctor, and there was Lee Irvin and a host. But those 3 were incredibly special. But I only played, I sort of sprinkled against people like the Chappells and Dennis Lilly and, Alan Knott and all the others. But those are the guys I really fought against on a fairly regular basis. I've got to just say something before, because you're going to ask me. Ian Gould, who's one of our umpires and a fantastic elite umpire, he wants to say, sorry you can't be here, he's in Bangladesh, which is not quite as nice as Lord's. But he sends his best regards to everyone here, and thanks for joining.
Great.
I think most probably the most frightening thing in my life was having to face Dennis Lilly in 1976 when they came out for the International Wanderers to South Africa. And in those days, as Mike and quite a few of the older guys here would remember, we had very thin thigh pads, we didn't have helmets, chest guards and wrist things and things in the elbows didn't exist. We had just moved from the sort of spiky green stuff on the gloves to the others, and I made a special point in the first test, or in the inverted commas test, at Wanderers to be very nice to Dennis Lilly. So we went into the dressing room afterwards and made sure I sat next to him, and we got on very well and chatted. And I made a very stupid mistake in the second test, in inverted commas, down at Kingsmead, and I bowled him a bounce the first ball and I got him a short leg. So that was really a stupid thing to do. So I'm walking out to bat. The score is 98 for 8, and I'm joining Ted Smith at the crease. And as I'm walking out, Dennis says to me, Vince, nice to see you. I'll give you one off the mark. And I said, thanks, Dennis. And as I got down, I realised he was going to give me a bounce off the mark, so I ducked before he had bowled. Sort of fizzy thing went past me. And Titchmarsh, who still is one of my best friends, came down the wicket and said, "Lucky you bowled your slow one." So, you know, I had 3 games with that man. He was fantastic. I mean, there were hundreds out there who were fantastic, you know, and they really were. But that was my one sort of memory that sparks up.
And it's a loss to us all that we never saw players like yourself enough at the high school.
That's very nice of you, but I'm nothing. I mean, if you look at someone like Graham and Barry and Sprocky, they are absolutely immense.
I think 85 wickets and an average of 16 is not too shabby, I think. Let's move on to Mike. I mean, Norman's given us a little insight, as if we needed it, into your captaincy skills and how you made him feel 10 feet tall and clearly got the best out of him. Have you ever been in a position where you had to do an Alex Ferguson hairdryer and throw the teacups around the room, or is that just not your style?
You should probably ask some of the other people in this room. But I could be very bad-tempered, I'm afraid.
Right. Give us an example. and name names if possible. That would be good.
Name names and use words.
Yeah.
No, I do remember one time we were playing here, and I think it was against Leicester. The rain? What about the rain?
Yeah. All right, mate, save your breath. You've got to blow your girlfriend up later. Right.
Sorry, I couldn't quite...
Right, let's carry on, Mike.
No, I was thinking of a match where we got to be about 90 for 5 before lunch on the first day against Leicester, and when the second person ran himself out before lunch, I remember shouting rather impolitely from, I think it was Roland Butcher actually, from the balcony here, which was pretty disgraceful. But anyway, no, there's various things like that I'm not proud of. I think the only thing to say about that is that I think if you show passion, and you which includes sometimes getting angry unreasonably, people will forgive you more often than if you're not interested. That's the only thing I'll say. Sometimes.
I've got to be honest, I mean, Mike does miss... I thought he was going to tell the story of playing against Leicester, which I wasn't part of. I was injured for that game. When you said something quite nasty to Yozza Hughes as he went off for tea time on the third day. I thought that story was going to come up.
I thought that was quite nice. No, I remember saying to Yozza was a terrific bowler, like Norman, same generation, coming in at that time. And I noticed you put me out here with 3 fast bowlers, which I'm very appreciative of. They protect me against those others. But Yozza was one of those bowlers who had terrific ability and talent, but he didn't have a great deal of confidence in himself. And he would tend to bowl 3 or 4 good balls and over, and then he'd bowl a half volley and a couple of half volleys and he'd spoil a good over. And I remember playing, actually it was Essex here, up at the top there. We were trying to get them out to win the match on the last day, and he bowled a terrific over, 4 balls exactly in the right place, and eventually he got one of their batsmen, number 7 or 8, out, caught behind. And I remember saying to him, well bowled, Yozza, but if you can bowl 4 balls like that, you can bowl 6. And Yozza said, no. I said, no, I can't bowl 6 good balls now. Anyway, but that was a kind of, that was...
Sorry, what did you say? No.
Well,
You sorry, this is... Brearley's really... What Brearley said was, well, then you can never be a first-class cricketer.
Do you want to take over, Vince? Is that all right?
I know you aren't used to that.
Gus, we'll come to you. We just talked about passion, and I've read up a bit about you. You are, despite the elder Vince, very passionate about your cricket, and particularly about Middlesex. Can you tell us what Middlesex has meant to you?
Well, obviously, like Norman, like Mike, we've only played for one club. So I was born in Lancashire, travelled down here. I was a Lancashire supporter when I was younger. It was my brother, Alistair, who was playing for Middlesex youth sides. I didn't get my chance. I got my chance through performing for Stanmore and got spotted by Don Bennett, who was often in the trees, sort of hiding, looking at you, and without you knowing it, to sort of see how you were performing. And no, I mean, I say to play at this ground, the club is one of the most successful in the country. If you play at the best ground in the country, it's a privilege to sort of work here and to have spent 25 of my sort of 35 working, more than 28 of my 35 working years at this place. It's an absolute honour. There's so much that the club represents and the club's done, and it's one of the things that I keep saying to our players. You don't know how lucky you are to be playing for this club, because it is special, and you should make the most of what the chance you've got. I just go to Vintcent, who's incredibly modest. I always remember one of my friends, Steve Williams, he was in the Middlesex Colts, and Colts were allowed to come and watch cricket then, and there was a Middlesex Lancashire game, and I think it was obviously 1980, and so I was only sort of 14, 15 at the time, and I was a Lancashire fan at the time, and I was sort of taking the mickey out of him, sort of, who's this old boy bowling the other end, saying to my mates, and all of a sudden he knocked 3 or 4 of the Lancashire players over, and sort of realised sort of what a magnificent bowler he was. And I think Don Bennett, when he sort of employed or signed me up, he saw me as a sort of Vintcent Van der Bijl style bowler. Unfortunately, I think I'm a poor man's Vintcent Van der Bijl. So looking at the record books, that's for sure, to have performed like he did. And I think that 1980 side, I don't know whether Mike thinks, was probably the strongest and best side that Middlesex ever produced.
We've got to move on. We've got a lot still to get through, including Jeff Miller, and then Gus is going to interview the new legends. But just briefly then, just go down the panel, and if you could pinpoint one player, each of you, in turn, that you love to play with or watch again, who would you say was your all-time hero? We'll start with Gus.
Middlesex player.
Whoever you like, really. Yeah, Middlesex.
Well, the greatest player I played against was Brian Lara. I always think he's the greatest cricketer of my generation. I would probably, I don't know whether I probably wouldn't say Tufnell. Having sort of changed next to him for 15 years and been an amateur marriage guidance counsellor and psychologist. But tough as, I mean, they were happy days listening to him moaning about being the unluckiest bowler in the world, because he wasn't. I was.
Actually, I read Tuffers is now happily married, so he's obviously done well to leave you behind, Gus, really. Norman, your legendary hero, either Middlesex or international, both.
Well, obviously one of my heroes was as a young bowler was Michael Holding. He was a fantastic bowler. I remember watching him in 1976, and I thought, wow, I'd love to be able to do what he's doing. And so it was inspirational. Dennis Lilly, another one, was as a fast bowler. As a batsman, I remember I went to West Indies to play England versus the rest of the world, and it was going to be the first time bowling against Viv Richards. And I said to Malcolm Marshall, I said, Malcolm, how would you get Viv out? Bowling in first time. I said, Norman, he says, look, when he first comes in, just shape it outside off stump, and he's normally a bit vulnerable out there. So obviously, great fast bowler. Took his advice, and I remember running in and just shaping outside the off stump. But Viv, what I reckon, the great thing about great batsmen is how quickly they move their feet. And before you knew it, it was in position, and whipping it through the onside. And I thought, wow, this guy's pretty special. Middlesex players, I suppose one of my heroes at Middlesex when I was on the ground staff was watching the guys bowl was Wayne Daniel. And I used to watch Wayne bowling, and I used to watch him exercise, and I used to go, one day I want to be out there, I want to be opening bowling with this man, because, he's just an amazing athlete. And he wasn't just an amazing athlete on the field, he was an amazing athlete off the field as well. he taught me a thing or two.
Actually, that moves very nicely onto you, Vince, because you bowled at the other end of Wayne Daniel. So I know you've already mentioned heroes. Just pick one out of all those that you mentioned. If you could just choose one.
Just choose one. It has to be Barry Richards.
Okay.
I think, my view is, I think he was the best player post World War II. He played in innings, first-class cricket with the edge of the bat. He then played nominations, where we had a chap called Neville MacDonald, and the other side Bradley Nicholson, where Dennis Gamsey was a cyphering cricketers the other side, saying, okay, I want this ball to go over first slip. So Neville used to bowl in-duckers, would bowl a Yorker outside the leg stump. Barry would take 2 yards back and flip it over leg stump. I've never seen skills like that. I would like to say one thing, and I know you're going to think I'm sentimental, but if you ask me, because your question was, who are the greatest players you like to play with, I'd always like to play with Brearley. Mainly because he brings out in you something you didn't know you had. And I think put up your hands, those who are happily married, girls and boys. That's it. That's good. That's pretty good. Okay, because great wives, as great husbands, bring out something in you which you didn't know you had. And that's what this man does. I know.
Well, I put my hand up, so I'm happily married, although the wife isn't.
You can see why then.
But, okay, Mike, if you're not blushing with pride here.
I am actually.
Can you pick one player who's your hero?
Well, I'm going to pick two, which is, one is, who hasn't had enough of a mention tonight, which is Fred Titmus. And Fred was, well, everyone knows, but he was a terrific bowler. He was a gutsy batsman. He was a good fielder, and he was a very shrewd bloke. And he often had to bring Middlesex back into the game, you know, because he could bowl well on green pitches as well as on turnovers. He was a terrific cricketer. And the other one was Norman's mentioned, Wayne Daniel, the Black Diamond. Mike Smith used to call him rent and rates, because he made the difference between having enough to pay and not. And he was a great team man. He was a terrific bowler. I remember the first time he played here was against Kent, end of April. That was the beginning of the season in those days. And you'll forget what that's like. And Clive and I were at slip, and we just moved back about 2 feet every ball he bowled, you know. And we thought, oh, this is good, but I hope it doesn't come to me. But Wayne was great, and there's lots of others, and thank you very much. It's a great occasion too. So.
Okay, well, we've got. We want to get, I believe, the President, Clive, to come up again and present the 3 caps. And you can applaud him as he comes up if you wish. Ladies and gentlemen, would you thank Mike Brearley, Vintcent Van der Bijl, Norman Cowans, and Angus Fraser.